and he stops next to me and he flips open uh, an ID, and I didn't have to look at it. I knew that I knew instinctively that was FBI. And he later told me that I lost all the blood from my face. I went white.
Stories like yours, although highly puffed up and stylized, are usually relegated to the pages of a popular novel or the silver screen, where they continue to capture our collective imagination over and over again. No matter the incarnation or the medium, we simply never get tired of this character, the character of a spy. And not that that's an accurate
Uh-huh.
representation of anything, of course, but they're simply never going to stop making a James Bond or a Jason Bourne or whatever, because we're never going to be fed up with it. We keep coming back for more. So, my first question to you is this: when you think about your story, do you sometimes still pinch yourself in disbelief, like thinking, holy cow, I was a real spy? I was the guy. How utterly crazy is that?
Yeah,
Or is it one of those things where your life is the only one you've ever lived? And even if it sounds extraordinary to other people, to you, it just seems normal.
I pinch myself more often about the life that I have today. And
Interesting.
I tell you why.
Please.
I tell you why, because I meet so many interesting people. And this is like, my brand, my past is like a key that opens all kinds of doors that I didn't even know existed. I mean, I can now continue talking for the rest of the evening about all these great, smart, successful, wonderful, heart-centered people that I know, mostly men, some women, but it's just amazing, and it happens almost every week that somebody pops up and says, "Oh my God, here's another person who could be a really, really good friend."
You mentioned East Germany. You were born in 1949, I believe, in what was
Yes,
East
sir.
Germany, in Jena or close to Jena, right?
No, no, no. Jena was where I went to college.
University. Yeah.
Well, I was born as a small, small city, right on the border. There's a triangle where Germany borders both Poland and the Czech Republic. And surprise, surprise, I'm only half German and genetically a quarter Polish and a quarter Czech. Makes sense.
Oh, well, welcome to the fold. I'm Slovenian, so we're fellow Slavs then, at least partially.
Yeah, half of it.
On your mother or on your father's side, are you like half? I mean, quarter Polish and quarter
Well, I
Czech.
don't know. They both grew up in the same region,
I see.
so they didn't grow up in the same town or same village, but in the same area of the country. So it could be both. But I'm thinking it's mostly my mother because
Yeah.
genetically, as far as my behavior and my character, my basic character, I'm more like her than my dad.
I see. But they were both native German speakers, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. You were studying chemistry at the University of Vienna, though. That part is correct,
yes sir.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
You mentioned this highly unusual proposition, but before we go to that proposition itself, why do you think it was you specifically who was approached? Which criteria did you fulfill that was important?
Well, first of all, I nobody ever told me the events that happened for me finally being asked whether I was ready to join. I know pretty much what they were looking for candidates for this kind of a job. The- This I found out, many years
It's so
later when
funny
I
that
did
you're
research.
calling it a job, like it's a 9 to 5, even though we're all like, "Oh my god, this is the most crazy, exciting thing of all
All right,
time."
mission.
Mission, yes, yes, yes.
The information I gathered was came out of interviews that were given by two ex-directors of the Directorate S, the Illegals Directorate that was on the part of the first Directorate, espionage, and they were pointing out the character traits that they were looking for, sort of a character profile with about a dozen entries. And obviously, they were looking for really, really smart people.
Yeah.
They were looking for people that were fearless. They were looking for people who had no problem with change, and they were looking for people who can make quick decisions, and quick and good decisions. And my favorite was I'm going to finish with that. There were a few more, but my favorite was a well-controlled inclination for adventure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I was always an adventurous kind of person, even as a child, and and that goes with high risk tolerance. Collection of those character traits doesn't necessarily making me a better person, but it is rather unusual. Okay, so and it took him 18 months to even figure me out and making sure that I fit the mold, so to speak. 18 months after the first contact, I had 18 months worth of informal contact with one agent who was stationed in Jena, and we talked about everything. He became sort of like my second father because my dad left the family, and this fellow was about 10 years older than me, and I was glad to have a male in my life to share everything, everything, including weaknesses and things that I didn't like, and on and on and on. I was just completely honest, and the guy was he. I never met a psychologist who studied me in the KGB. That was him. It was his judgment that he sent to Berlin, and which then triggered the question by the head of the KGB in East Germany. So are you gonna be joining us? So, and at that point, I thought I was in, but not really. Once I said yes, but and actually, that question was a final test, and it was not really the final test, but the final test to just make sure that I'm the right person. He gave me less than 24 hours to come up with the answer.
Hmm.
So if I had stalled, they would have said, okay,
This is not the guy.
go, yeah, no, go back to your job as a professor at the university. I already was an assistant professor, and no harm done. Okay, they would have just figured, this guy's not quick enough in terms of making decisions, and I'm super quick. I shoot from the hip.
Also, the final question is actually a test, whether you'd say yes or no.
It was a test. I didn't know it was a test.
So after
There's
you
a
said,
couple of
yeah, please go ahead.
There was a couple of other tests that I didn't know they were tests.
Such as,
But
can you talk about them?
when I said yes, we made arrangements for me to quit the university, and within a month's time, I showed up in Berlin with a suitcase and a briefcase, and not much. I didn't have much in terms of belongings, and I figured, this is the KGB. I would be given a nice place to live. No. So I meet my new handler named Nikolai, and we were in his car, and he looked at me and he says, "I already have a task for you." And I says, "Ooh, what is it?" And I was like getting excited. He said, "You got to find a place to live." Now, my heart dropped from here down to very low, but being the stoic that I didn't know I was, and I am, I didn't show any reaction
Poker face.
because it was an impossible task, because all living space was owned and managed by the government,
Right.
and there were married couples with children who lived with their parents. There was a
Waiting
shortage
list.
of, absolutely. So there were no apartments available, and I couldn't afford a hotel. Okay, there were not, like when I arrived in New York, I stayed at a hotel for 1 year where the rent was month by month by month. These are as a single room occupancy, and so if I fail that test, I'm out. Now, I wasn't aware of that. I just found
Damn.
some like a room with a concrete room, a windowless room that had a bed, a table, and running cold water. I didn't tell Nikolai anything. I just told him I found something.
Mm.
And then the last test that I actually became aware of because I met somebody who failed that test was when they sent me to the other side of the Berlin Wall, and
To West
that
Berlin.
yeah, just like just go there and walk around and
But
and
right. But the wall
get.
was already there, or was it just the
Oh
bar
yeah, the
the
wall was
fence?
there.
I
No,
see.
no, 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 the wall was there. So and I traveled with an East German passport, but I was in enemy territory, right? And I had to go twice. The first time, just just smell the air and look around. Second time, I had to go to an apartment and ring the bell and find a way to talk to the occupants and find out something about them or whatever. I don't quite remember,
Just a
but
specific
that was.
person or random?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It was a specific
I
person. It
see.
was an operational task.
Wow.
And the reason I know that this was also a test because I met a classmate of mine accidentally who who had failed the same test for East German uh, secret police, Stasi. When he came back from his test visit, he told him, "I can't do that." And guess what? He never worked as an engineer. He had a degree in engineering. He had to fight his way through a whole bunch of odd jobs, and eventually wound up selling, trading in model train sets. In hindsight, some of the most dangerous situations I was in my career or wannabe career, that was right at the beginning.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow. Um, okay, before we go on, if we rewind just a little bit back,
yeah, sure.
why did you say yes? Was it the sense of adventure you always had, or were reasons a little bit more ideological?
Yes, without the ideological foundation, I wouldn't have signed up.
Right.
I mean, it was a foundation, but uh, the adventure was. I mean, that was a big, big, big bait in front of me. But finally, and I want to quote Kim Philby. You know who Kim
Yeah,
Philby
the
was.
famous spy.
Yes, when he was asked, why he joined, he said, "Well, when the most powerful intelligence agency on the planet and in history asks you to join, you don't think twice about it." There was a phenomenal amount of flattery in that offer
Right. A certain
because
sense of prestige that they picked you, right?
when you're at that age, and I was in my mid 20s. First of all, I had already aced high school, and I had received a national scholarship that was limited to 100 concurrent holders. So I already was the elite. Okay,
Mm.
I was going places. I most likely I would have wound up in government, and so I was already like really full of myself. And now comes this offer.
Right.
You can't say no to that. Never mind all the negative thoughts and all the bad things that could happen. I was at a point where everything I touched turned out to be successful. I even made myself into a functioning basketball player, even though I had no talent.
That's
So
impressive because I'm a big basketball nut and it's not the easiest game out there.
I had no left hand.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I
matter.
still
I,
don't.
I wound up playing on the fifth best team in East Germany.
Wow. Respect.
Yeah, because I worked like a maniac, and I ran and I jumped, and I knew how to flop. And
Which position did you play?
I played forward in those days. At my height, I was one of the tallest people. And the taller ones were very awkward. I'm 6 feet 3. I would play point guard in
Oh wow,
college.
you're tall. Yeah, yeah. Would you say that Germans were particularly popular recruits within the KGB? I'm in Japan right now, and of course, Japan is the country where one of the most famous spies of all time, Richard Zorge,
Yep.
another
Right.
German, worked. He infiltrated the German embassy here during the Second World War and actually found out
Yep.
that the Nazis planned to attack the Soviet Union. So it's an interesting. I just read his biography coincidentally, and it just made me think. Wait, maybe Germans are well predisposed to be spies.
This is a educated guess, but Russians, for some reason, because of their language, have a hard time to get rid of their accent.
I see.
So
I mean, but
when you
Germans can
say
have a
hello,
strong accent too. Let's. I mean, okay, Arnold Schwarzenegger is
yes,
Austrian, but
a lot of illegals were smuggled into third countries, and if you, let's say, travel with a German accent and you go to Brazil and you seek, you want to get some kind of documentation to be able to work there, and then you get it, become a citizen, then you can legally emigrate. It's Canada and Brazil were favored
I
countries
see.
to do that. So I think Germans. The only other illegal that of the batch that I belong to that I'm aware of is also a German. He wound up living in New York at the same time I did, about 5 miles. We were 5 miles away from each other, didn't know about each other. And he had been sent with his wife, but he did not do what I did, because he speaks English with a bit of an
I
accent.
see.
I can hear my own accent, but it's negligible and easy to explain.
Right. How did you explain it, by the way?
My by accident, the birth certificate of Jack Barsky has his mother his mother's maiden name Schwartz.
German.
So yeah, the German Jewish, but it could be non-Jewish. It could be just German. And we in the backstory, we just killed my father. Uh, he died in his 30s of a heart attack, which caused me some problems when I had to tell doctors my medical history. They were really worried.
Oh, fascinating. So let's go back. You were in Berlin for a while, but then I think you go have some additional training in Moscow. Is that
Oh yeah,
correct? How does that
oh yeah,
happen?
because well, I got some basic training in Berlin. That was supposed to be about 2 years, and part of the training, I was required to acquire another language,
Another
better
what?
than
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
another language. I'm
Another
sorry,
language, yeah.
uh, and they allowed me to pick the language, so I picked English. And like with everything else I did in those days, and I still do today, when I do something, I give it 100%. And I went I went at it like a maniac every day. Okay,
But were you a complete
and
beginner or did you know some English already?
I knew I had some school
I
English,
see. So not
and
much.
I no, I actually started from scratch.
Yeah, wow,
We
impressive.
the first tutor that I had, we worked off of the beginner's book, high school book, but I pretty quickly advanced to the next guy, and then I outgrew him, and as the third guy, I had conversations with, and after that, there was nobody available anymore, and I was already able to read novels without the help of a dictionary. And when Moscow found that out, they had the light bulb went on and said, "Wait a minute." So they had me speak freely into a tape recorder, whatever, and they were sent back to Moscow. And within a week, I was on a plane to Moscow to be interviewed by two ladies. One was a born American, and the other one was a teacher, English teacher at Moscow University. Obviously, she was KGB. And after 20-minute talk, they withdrew to another room, and they were talking back and forth. And it turned out that the American overruled the Russian, who had her doubts. But the American said, "I can work with him."
Hmm.
It's American optimism. And so now I moved to Moscow, and I spent 2.5 years in Moscow. I worked with this woman for twice. I met her twice a week, every week, and every evening for a year and a half. I did these phonetics exercises again. Like I did like stuff, repetitive stuff, because it had to be done. So I had one tape, okay, phonetics tape, where an English speaker says a word and you repeat it, and that is how I got rid of, like, I would say 90% of my German accent, and another 5% followed when I was introduced to one Robert, not Morris Cohen, who was an atomic spy, and wound up eventually in the Soviet Union after he was exchanged in a prisoner exchange. He
Wow.
wound up doing espionage in England as well. So anyway, I finally had a male voice I could model myself after, because a woman is a different story. And so it was roughly about 5 years after I started my training in Berlin, I was launched to the United States.
Wow. Just a second. What else did the training include? Okay, getting rid of your accent is one thing. Language training is
Yeah,
part of
sure,
that. What
language.
else? What are the skills
Well,
that were needed in the
well,
70s and
the
expected of
big
us?
heading
Yeah, please.
is tradecraft, right? All the skills? These were skills that you had to acquire. They were not talents that I was born with.
Right.
Uh, Technical skills. I had to learn Morse code. I had to learn shortwave, reception. I had to learn algorithms for decryption and encryption, secret writing, meeting protocols, uh, dead drop operations. You know what a dead drop operation is?
Right. You leave something somewhere and then somebody picks it up, or vice
Yeah,
versa.
that's correct. It's an asynchronous exchange of objects as opposed to information. And photography. I learned how to make microdots. Did I say secret writing? Oh,
You
and
did.
surveillance detection.
Surveillance
Surveillance
detection.
detection was
So figuring out if
oh,
somebody's following you.
oh yeah, that was huge. The skill with regard to surveillance detection is that you cannot be it cannot be clear that you're looking for surveillance. So you have to do something that looks quite normal. That means you need to find spots where, if somebody is following you, and that's usually a team, where one of that team is close enough so you can see their face. And so if you see the same face twice, you know that you're being followed. Now, interestingly enough, that skill set is a little bit out of date, because I met the woman who is another person I can brag about, who together with her husband developed faces that can be changed very quickly.
What, like a
Uh,
mask?
she has a she has a picture of herself as a mask of herself looking like a black man,
Okay, wow.
and that can be the changes would take no longer than a minute. So now you have to pay attention to the shoes.
Oh, interesting. I see. So you can
Because
you
people
can
forget
change
to
your
change
face.
shoes.
You can change your face quicker than your shoes.
Well, people forget.
Right. Wow.
It's harder,
Mm.
and I don't know if every counterintelligence service knows is familiar with that technique. But anyway, that was my big advantage, that I had phenomenal memory of faces.
How do you
Not
not get,
anymore.
once you receive this training, especially in counter surveillance, how do you not get constantly paranoid in your everyday life? I think I would be the worst spy of all time because I'm already like a little bit anxious. And then, armed with this sort of training, I would just be looking over my shoulder constly when I was in
Well,
enemy
that's
territory.
yeah, that's a big no-no, obviously. And didn't I tell you I'm a stoic?
Yeah,
And people ask
you did mention that.
people ask me, were you ever afraid? No, I was tense in certain situations, but afraid, no. I did what I had to do, and that is, I think, the best, if not the only way, to be successful in this business. Because if you're worried and you're fearful, you're going to make decisions based on fear, and that's the worst decisions you can make. You're going to make mistakes then. Okay, I was like, I call this execution mode. I was very mechanical when I had to perform these particular tasks. Just I needed to know. I knew what I needed to do, and I just did it. And in my brain, I didn't. I'm not going to say it, but for emphasis, I would like to say the F word. Like, just get
You can totally say it if you want to on this podcast.
yeah, get the fuck, get it done, man. You know?
um, okay, just one last question regarding training. This is a trope in every spy film, but did you get any sort
Yeah,
of weapons or martial arts training, or is that not really necessary in that
yeah.
line?
I got some self defense training.
Really?
Yeah,
In what kind of
and
martial
not
art? Is it judo? Is it karate? That's in the
it was
70s.
it was jujitsu,
Jiu-jitsu, wow.
and and it was not to fight with the FBI. It was because a lot of dead drop operations take place in parks and places where there aren't too many people, where you could be subject to
An ambush,
being held up.
right.
Yeah, and uh, and if you have material in your possession that could have indicated that you're up to no good, so they were worried about something like that. So for over 6 months, once a week, I was trained, and for the first couple of years while I was in New York, I spent every night before going to bed. I spent practicing my moves, but over time I said, "God,
Okay, so that's
you
a
get sloppy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, that's a real thing. That's really, really interesting. Anyway,
But
yeah,
no firearms, nothing. I never touched a firearm in my entire life.
right, right. No license to kill,
No, and you can, even with martial arts, you can kill
of
somebody
course.
with
Yeah,
a certain move.
yeah, yeah.
None of that. No.
I believe in 1978 you were finally sent on your mission in the U.S.
Yes,
Suddenly,
that's correct.
you're alone in enemy territory, expected to navigate a country you've never been to before, if I understand it correctly,
Yeah.
right? And not
Well,
simply,
I started
yeah.
from Moscow. I flew to Belgrade. So,
Oh, to Yugoslavia.
yeah, but I didn't spend more than a half a day.
All right,
It was just a way station. And from Belgrade, I took a train to Vienna. Austria. That was easy for me to
of course.
navigate, right? But then I wound up in Italy, in Rome. So a lot of people that would have a problem, and I found a way to get through, because you need to find your way.
Hmm.
I didn't speak the language at all, not
Right.
even a little bit.
And there's no internet in
Uh,
those days
no, and I had to meet another agent and exchange passports.
in Rome.
I met one agent in Vienna, and we exchanged passports there. And then in Rome, I got my Canadian passport. And from there, from Rome, I went via Madrid and wound up in Mexico City. And I didn't speak one word of Spanish. And I managed to find my way to I think English did reasonably well in Mexico, at least, but not with regard to the science. It wasn't a bilingual country, but a lot of people spoke English.
Yeah.
So, and from there, I took a plane, landed in Chicago, and that's that was my point of entry in the United
What are
States.
your first moves then in the US?
I had to find a place to stay overnight because it was already dark.
Seems
All
to be a
right.
bit of a theme, finding a place to stay in the spy's life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and and I for the longest time I didn't have a lot of luck because this one uh, uh, I was not given any help by the KGB because they didn't have anybody in Chicago. They didn't know anything about the city, and they didn't know that there was some things that they didn't know that I should have known because I wound up in the south side of Chicago in a hotel. You know, the south side of Chicago
I've
is
heard
known
of
as
it. Yeah, I heard it's can be a bit of a
there
dodgy
was.
place.
Excuse me, there were no white people in that place.
Right.
So here I am, 6'3". You know, when I woke up after the first night, I woke up and I get outside and looking for some place to eat, and after about 10 minutes, I said, I don't belong here. And I had cash on me, and this place just didn't feel right. I didn't know where I was, but it felt really bad. So I had to make a decision, and this is when I almost blew it because I decided, okay, I got to get out of here, and I as I had traveled down by cab from the airport in the southern direction, I sensed that the neighborhoods got less and less nice.
Mm.
So I figured I would just to take a walk going north. It was a good idea. But I also decided at that point to uh, kill the Canadian, to destroy the passport,
Hmm.
and take a birth certificate of Jack Barsky, authentic birth certificate copy, out of a secret compartment in one of my bags, and become Jack Barsky. Because in those days you really didn't need ID at all. You could get on a plane without showing anything. Okay, you just get a ticket. That's all you needed in
But
those
how did you
days.
get your hands on a legit American birth certificate? The KGB provided that for you in advance?
Yes, they did because they found an agent on the diplomatic cover who was stationed in Washington D.C. found the grave of Jack Barsky in a cemetery,
Hmm.
and Jack Barsky was a young person who died at the age of 11. By the way, I now have a picture. I went to visit that graveyard. I have a picture where I'm standing next to my tombstone. It's a that does not go on social media.
Yeah,
That could easily be
of
misunderstood.
course.
Right. So, but anyway, so yeah, and so they sent me on my way when I left Moscow. I had that birth certificate with me. So now I'm proceeding to destroy the passport, and unfortunately, uh, passport destruction was not part of my training.
So you
I
have to
tried to.
destroy your Canadian passport, which is what,
Oh
fake?
yeah, yeah. It was a really good forgery, I'm
I
assuming,
see. Yeah, 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 yeah.
but
You got to get rid of it.
it was fake.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, as I said, passport destruction, I wasn't trained, and nobody ever told me how to get rid of that kind of a document, so I tried to burn it. And I went to the bathroom and I took a lighter out, and I tried to first burn the page that had my picture on it. And it didn't really burn, it just like moved around and released a lot of smoke. And as I'm looking up the ceiling, I realize I'm right under a smoke detector. Panic! But good reaction. I threw that passport into the toilet. I was like right over the toilet into the water, and I got really lucky that the alarm didn't go off because if it does, I'm busted.
Wow.
Not only that, I'm busted in a place where I have nobody to help me, and I'm going to wind up in jail. And then I have, as per protocol, I would have had to ask for the East German embassy, which didn't have anybody. I mean, this would have been like, and I would have returned as a total failure.
Mm.
Sometimes you get a little lucky.
Um, in in the movies or TV shows, spies are usually prepared for every possible scenario, no matter how ridiculous it is. You, however, I believe quickly realized that you weren't properly prepared when it came to a more cultural aspect of living in America. I
Oh,
believe
you're so right. I wasn't prepared at
I
all.
think somebody
For some
said
reason,
one of your friends eventually told you that you're a bit too pushy and argumentative, if I can quote you a
yes,
little bit. In other words, you are
yes,
apparently too East German to fit in. How come the most
yes.
formidable spy agency in the world didn't seem to properly understand the culture it was sending its top sleeper agents to?
Okay, because in those days there was cultural ignorance and general ignorance both ways. Americans didn't know how Russia operated and what it meant to live in Russia,
Hmm.
and Russians didn't know how to live, how to act and live as an American. The problem was that the KGB agents that had operated, that had experience in the United States, were all under diplomatic cover. So while they had interaction with Americans, they didn't live as Americans. They lived in their own compound. They had their family with them. They didn't know what it would take to get a job, and they came back to Moscow and they were like super arrogant because they had jobs that everybody wanted. Everybody wanted to go to the
Of
U.S.,
course.
right?
Yeah.
And so they came, well, they look at me. I was like American and I know everything. The shitheads, I'm sorry,
No, no, no.
didn't know,
Not at all.
they didn't know what they didn't know. The arrogance was astounding. And there was nobody within the KGB who could tell them that, hey, listen, you you don't know much. And I found out, slowly, with a little help from my friend and I was already in the U.S. for 10 years, and I was still behaving like a German. So, but in New York, you kind of get away with this.
Because it's all
There's all kinds of
multicultural.
yes, but anyway, it's uh, I there was little bit of luck, but it was also um, um, desire to find out what it meant. I learned a lot, except for this one, the communication style that just didn't play well. Oh, no, the worst thing in life is if you don't know what you don't know. If you know what you don't know, you are in a much safer space. And these guys didn't know, and they were the experts. Nobody could tell them that they didn't know anything. So yeah.
Can you tell me more about these sort of cultural gaffes? Were there any more that you can think of where you kind of stood out like a sore thumb when you tried to fit in because of ill
Uh,
preparation?
some of the other things I was somewhat prepared for by my tutor, but her knowledge was dated. But for instance, in those days, most Americans would, when they eat, they have a fork in the left and a knife in the right, and they would cut the meat and then put the knife aside and start eating with the right hand with a fork only. That was important. Uh, and what I discovered very quickly, Germans are, when they have an argument with you, or when they get intense, they get very close to your face, much closer than Americans. So
Interesting.
I learned to avoid that rather quickly,
Hmm.
and that is one of the reasons that I learned all of these things. Is my first job. I was a bike messenger, and I interacted with a bunch of Americans uh, who weren't curious about me. Most of them were transients, and they didn't care where you come from, where you're going. But I watched
You
them.
were observing like a fly on the wall.
Oh yeah, and I'm naturally curious. So overall, that worked to my advantage. And when I went to college in the U.S., that was in New York, and there were a lot of minorities. So I the only thing that made me stand out a little bit was that I was 10 years older than the average student,
Mm.
but there were others like me. So the path that I took, and including my first job as a programmer, where at least half the other programmers were from other countries. So and eventually, I got to a point where I felt really comfortable, particularly as I was able to soften my communication style.
Here's something that's a little bit unclear to me. If I understand it correctly, the plan for you was that you were supposed to somehow get closer to circles of power in the US, right?
Yeah, sure.
Which
And well, the plan A was brilliant.
so
It
what was the
failed in
plan A?
execution. Plan A was for me to get the required documents to live as an American and live and work. That was a ID, a driver's license, and a social security card. I had those. I could get a job. I had an apartment. And then the plan was, after about 2 years, to apply for a passport and uh, move to a German speaking country. I'm thinking Switzerland or Austria,
Ah,
and open a business. And the KGB had experience how to funnel money into businesses. So let's take another 2 years, and I'm going back to the U.S. with $10 million in my account, and I don't have to tell anybody how that all worked and how I acquired this, because I just did in Europe, and I did this and this, and
right. And you're
it was great.
immediately injected into the upper sphere of the
Yeah, there
society
you go.
because you're a millionaire.
Yes, and I with that money in those days, I would have been able to join any country club, and I would have been able to socialize with interesting people.
What happened to plan
Um,
A?
I failed, but they sort of didn't help me not to fail. So when in Moscow, we practiced filling out the application. So I was familiar with the application looked like. And
Sorry, application for a passport.
what a passport,
Yeah.
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 And I was advised to apply in person. You could do it by mail or in person. And I don't know why. I thought that was a stupid mistake, but the crucial mistake I made. So I went to the passport office with my ID. I needed the birth certificate, the driver's license, and the filled out application. And it was already filled out. And the mistake I made was there was one question that asked, "What is your profession?" And I honestly wrote messenger.
Hmm.
I didn't think that through. And then there was a couple of optional questions. Where are you planning to go, and when are you planning to leave the country? And it was optional. I left it blank. So now, I was a messenger, all right, but I was on commission. I made enough money to actually be able to travel abroad. So I should have put in contractor.
I see.
So here, the guy was looking at the guy behind the counter was looking at my application, and he said, "Wait a minute, here's a guy who makes minimum wage because messengers made minimum wage. The vast majority of them minimum wage. He doesn't know where he's going, and he doesn't know when he's going there. Something is fishy." And so he called me back, and he says, "We have some questions, some doubt about your identity. Could you please fill out
Oh my God.
this additional questionnaire?" I still was in my stoic mode and figure out, okay, I'm just going to fill out the other questionnaire. Question number one, and this is where the stoic finally um, panicked. So the question was, where did you go to high school?
Oh shit.
Well, exactly. But I saved. Again with quick decision making. I, I didn't even think about it, and there was no planning. I just instinctively I did. This is what I did. I took that questionnaire, and I I mumbled something to me with some curse words, and then I went to the counter and I put the questionnaire in front of him, and I said something like, "I don't need all this shit." And I took the application and my documents that were lying in front of him with me. I
Oh
took them
wow,
away.
no way.
Is that a movie scene or what?
That is a movie scene if I've ever seen one.
And that's one of the reasons the KGB hired somebody like me, because my instincts have been most of the time very, very good.
In your shoes, I would have just collapsed and confessed to everything on the spot. So that's really impressive.
Yeah, so now plan B was going back to college and then like working my way up. It would have actually worked in the long run because eventually I made a career and I even had a executive job in a company that co-owned a nuclear plant. And my last job was with a company that manages part of the United States electric grid. So I made it.
Yeah, but may I ask, did Plan B come up with a blueprint attached, or was it just some sort of a long-term improvisational kind of a thing? You were just dropped there, into an
Yeah,
alien culture and expected to achieve that.
it was a dream, but I tell you what, and this will surprise you as it surprises everybody else. I was not really told what my value was to the KGB, what that primary value was, and that was me actually being there, living in the United States as an American. Again, I found that out through one of those interviews, and I'm going to drop two names: Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen. You know who they are, right?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Okay,
Yeah,
they were the most destructive spies for the KGB in the United States. They were moles, one in the FBI and the other one in the CIA. And there were significant concerns that the spy war, CIA versus the KGB, would get out of hand. And almost all the spies in the other country, the Americans and the Soviets, they were all diplomats. And when a diplomat was caught doing espionage stuff, they got kicked out. And then there was retaliation, and sometimes there were three people that got kicked out, back and forth. And there was a significant fear that all of a sudden diplomatic relations
cut.
would be cut, and the only ones left, if there were any besides me, and I think there may have been this my other friend, uh, to have contact with these super agents would have been us illegals. So everything else, they didn't tell me that. They also didn't tell me, how I would get instructions, uh, what to do when diplomatic relations were cut. And there's also some rumors, and even some folks in Russian intelligence are still hinting that there may be stashes of hidden weapons someplace in the United States. No, no training, no idea. I mean, they left me completely in the dark.
They just told you to
Now,
live your life as an American for an extended
my
period.
life, and the mantra was always contacts, contacts, contacts. Get to know as many people as you can, and determine whether they would be in a position. Maybe they already have access to any kind of secret, or they might be in a position one day to have access to secrets. So particularly students, when I was studying, I profiled a lot of students, whether they approached them and tried to recruit them. I don't know. I never got any feedback as to a specific job that well done. Nothing. Zero.
How did you communicate with the center in
Uh,
Moscow?
yeah, I got my instructions and answers to my questions. Short wave
Transmission.
transmissions once a week, uh, double encrypted. That was a pain in the neck. But it was even more painful to communicate back because I had to use secret writing, and that took a half a day because I had to encrypt some of the information I sent. I had to write a letter, an open letter pretending I know the person I'm sending the letter to, and then I had to use a specific contact paper that was used to put the secret writing over the open text. It's invisible, some chemical that eventually would be mailed in the letter was mailed by airmail, regular airmail, to a third country where somebody picked it up. A volunteer for the KGB gave it to a diplomat, and they went into the diplomatic pouch and wound up in Moscow. So, the communication cycle for me to actually have a question and get an answer was about 3 weeks. So most of the time, I couldn't wait that long. It was communication was a royal pain in the neck, and I never, and it again, I did not know that this was a hard rule that for all illegals were never to meet another agent in the country where they were illegals. So that was valid for France, Italy, any of the other countries, including the United States, simply because the other agents were mostly diplomats and were at least suspected by counterintelligence and more likely to be followed, which put us high value assets at severe risk of getting blown up.
During your
So yeah,
yeah
communication was a bitch.
yeah wow. During your time as an active agent in the US, what was your biggest scoop, would you say?
Since I didn't get any feedback, I don't know if they recruited somebody who actually wound up to do good work on behalf of the KGB. That I don't know. Other than that, uh, I stole some software,
Yep.
and for the company where I worked, I had access to high value software. I don't know if that was usable because it was software that's still in use today, and has been improved a lot. But it's software that it's like an ERP. I don't even know what it stands for. Enterprise management software that allows you to run a big company. And I don't know if that would have been useful in a communist economy.
I see.
Anyway, but that's I thought that was pretty good. But my hands never touched anything that had top secret written on
Right,
it.
right, right.
And so I thought I thought I was a failure. I didn't feel good about this whole situation. But again, because of my ability to actually stick in the U.S. and stay there for as long as I did, they thought I was really successful. I'm going to show you something.
Please.
This thing is the Order of the Red Banner.
Oh
That
wow.
is second.
That looks
It's the
dope. I'm not
second.
gonna lie.
It's the second highest decoration of the Soviet Union. I received that in 19. Get this, 1988, and it was given to my wife.
Hmm.
And ironically, when I got the radio transmission where they said, that the Central Committee of the Communist Party had to approve that I got it, and it came with a monetary award of $10,000. The irony of this, I don't have to tell you, that they had no qualms. They just didn't see the dichotomy that I was being rewarded with the currency of a country that we were trying to destroy.
That is
Right?
ironic, yeah. So what?
Yeah, but
Excuse me. They gave this to your wife who was in East Germany, right?
yeah,
Of
yeah,
course. Wow.
right.
They wouldn't send this to
Uh,
to the States.
no.
That would be funny. Um, I also wanted to ask this: were honeypots an actual strategy in KGB's arsenal ever, or any other spy agency, or is that just another Hollywood cliche?
No, actually, they
They
were.
were.
and yes, and this is secondhand knowledge. When I can't recall who shared that with me, but they had. I may have even, I may have read it as well. I have a lot of friends who used to be counterintelligence. I also have a friend who was FSB.
Right.
But they had sort of little universities where they trained women. That was real. The what's the famous movie? There's a famous movie about one of those honeypots. Woman.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, Sparrow, something with Sparrow. I don't know, but
Okay.
yeah, no, big time. And as you know, the East Germans used Romeos. They used men.
I see. Wow. So
That
that
would have that would have been a better fit for me.
that was real. Well, you're a tall, handsome guy,
Oh yeah.
but they
Oh,
never they,
Romeos.
they never suggested that you do a little Romeoing on the side.
No.
Okay. Have you watched this TV show called The Americans? It's about the illegals
Yeah,
program in the
yeah,
80s.
yeah. No, I watched every episode. I also was an extra in one of the episodes.
Oh,
So
interesting. Were you consulting on that show a little bit?
no, I wasn't really consulting. Everybody thinks I was. They didn't need me. I did see a couple of things in their the way they laid out a KGB office in the studio where there was a couple of things that were wrong,
Hmm.
but they prided themselves on a lot of authenticity in terms of like the clothing and the cars and everything.
Because
They
it's
spent
set
a
in
lot
the
of time.
80s when you were active as
Yeah,
well, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, in the '80s, and they did a good job being as authentic as you can be. They also did a very good job showing the psychological issues that come with being an illegal in another country. And if you watch the show,
Yeah.
the male eventually decided he liked it in the U.S. and he wanted to stay, and the female didn't. So it became like a family drama. And then you had the kids involved as well. But as far as the depiction of espionage activity, not a one is realistic.
It's a very action-packed show, right? And they use honeypots all the time. He's a bit of a Romeo. She's using it as well,
Oh
right?
yeah, and
That's why I
and
mentioned it.
they have all the skills that you could possibly. They pick locks. They know how to kill people. They know how to get rid of the corpses.
Right, everything.
And the one thing that I squirmed every time I saw this, they would walk around in the city with wigs on their head.
Is that
That's
not
an
a
absolute.
that's not a good thing?
It's a violation. But if you're an illegal and somebody sees you with a wig on, somebody who knows you, you're in trouble.
Can't you just say like I'm bald and I'm wearing a wig for cosmetic reasons or
No, no,
something?
no. Somebody who knows you without the wig.
Oh, right.
Now the question comes up: why are you wearing a wig? Okay, wigs can be worn by the team that follows you when they change their appearance, because when they're busted, okay, they can go back home and say, okay, there was a failure. And on top of it, they had a functioning business
Yeah,
and two kids.
right.
How does it work? It doesn't. But it was good entertainment.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's what it is.
one more thing I need to say, actually,
Please.
it actually did some damage uh, to Americans who uh, figured that this is what real undercover spies look like, and this is how they act. Everybody knows that the James Bond is fiction,
Of
but
course.
most Americans, I get this question all the time. Most Americans thought that this is realistic, when in fact, I can tell them a little bit how to possibly uh, discover a spy among us because I lived it.
How can we do that? I'm gonna
Patterns,
patterns.
pattern.
Can you be a
Yeah,
little
for
bit more
instance,
specific?
every Thursday night for 10 years. I was not available for any social event because I had to listen to the radio. Okay, and when I stole the software, that took a while, and I went to work on Saturdays all of a sudden, and nobody cared what I was doing. Well, if you pay a little bit attention, if you pay a little bit of attention, you may see something that is a touch unusual.
So if you observe people, if I have a friend who's always missing during the Thursdays basketball practice, he's always missing just on Thursdays. I might have a bit of
Yeah,
a reason to question him a bit further.
yeah. No, nobody ever asked me, and I honestly, I would have probably uh, not been ready with a good answer. I just never thought about it. There's a lot of things that I know now that I didn't know then. I had a lot of time to think about it.
We were speaking of the TV show The Americans. What what do movies or TV shows get most wrong about spy work usually? Is it
Well,
that they're
all
like
the
so
adventure,
action packed? Is it all the
action,
glamorous lifestyle?
glamorous lifestyle is a possibility. Uh, it is a possibility for sure. I mean, for instance, Kim Philby, he lived a high life, right?
Yeah.
uh, and the Cambridge Five generally they were upper class, so that's possible. But end to end action, it's anybody who let me rephrase this: every retired ex intelligence agent who I spoke with confirms what I'm telling you now is the espionage game is 95% waiting and 5% action.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to have
I
patience.
hate
Yeah.
waiting. I'm not a patient person. So there you go. I would be very ill suited for this type of work. Anxious, impatient, impulsive, just the worst agent of all time. But you were patient.
I had to be. I forced into patience. You know, the protocols that we had required me to be patient. I am by nature impatient, but then I also have Germanic genes, and I was brought up to be very disciplined. Okay, so I was able to like overcome the impatience.
Back to your story, the final stretch of it. Your cover wasn't blown when you were still active. It was you who decided to finally get out. How did
Yeah,
that happen? And most of all, how did you live to tell the tale?
we had a protocol of signals where I could, and these were very simple signals. There was a signal spot where I could put a signal such some certain chalk marks or something like that, at a spot where the person who was to look for the signal uh, passed by on his way or her way, mostly his way to work. So, and that signal spot, it's clear to me it was on a road at an underpass where the person would most likely drive his vehicle to the United Nations. All right. So in my case, the signal spot was on a support beam, an iron support beam for the elevated portion of the A train. Part of the A train was above ground. It was subway, but it was above ground. And there were no, signals could have been something like when I would set a signal says when they asked me to confirm that I received and was able to decipher the most recent radiogram, or they would uh, ask me to uh, go for a dead drop operation the next day and that kind of stuff. Okay, very simple. And one of the signals was the danger signal. If I placed a danger signal, I forgot what it was. Essentially, what that meant is I'm running. I think I'm being pursued. I'm out of here.
Like out of
I'm
here,
going.
as in I'm leaving the country.
Yeah, I'm going to Canada. Okay, because out of the country, I wouldn't have had the document to other than going to Canada because you needed no more than a driver's license. And when if I ever saw that signal, which, by the way, was the strongest signal we ever had. It was a fist-sized red dot on that metal beam. If I ever saw that, it meant it's an order. We emergency protocol is now activated. Don't go home. Don't go to the bank. Uh, Hopefully, when I always had to have cash with me, so just run to the Canadian border.
So that means your cover's been blown. You got to get out.
Yeah. Yes. Uh, Neither the FBI nor I have a clue why they thought the cover was blown, but they were super nervous. They 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 were extremely protective of us, simply because if we got caught, it would cause a whole lot of problems. Because if we got caught, we have to they have to get us out. Not because they cared about us. If they don't get us out, which wasn't easy to do, if they don't get us out, they don't get any more people to sign up for the job. So I knew that they would get me out because they got the Cohens out when they were in British
Right.
jail.
So
So
usually
anyway,
in a swap, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and so they were really skittish and nervous, and they had reason to believe that I'm about to be arrested, and emergency protocol was activated. What they didn't know that I had an 18-month-old girl in the United States. Picture. She looked like this
Oh, wow.
uh, at the time. Pretty, pretty, pretty. And
Beautiful.
when she came into my life, I fell in love the way I didn't know that you can love that way unconditionally.
Excuse me.
I mean, I
Just to interrupt you really quick. Was that allowed to have a family in the
no, oh
US?
no,
Could you have
no,
a
no,
partner?
no.
Could you marry? Was that encouraged?
They knew that I most likely would have sexual relations.
Of
But
course, yeah.
I was married in Germany, and I was, I wasn't faithful in that respect because, when you're in your late 20s, you have some maybe not needs but desires. It's kind of hard to live like
A monk.
celibate.
Yeah.
And also, if you live celibate, then people might think, what's wrong with this guy?
Right.
So it was, but no, obviously no marriage was not even talked about.
But did they know that you're
I
married and have a daughter?
no
Did the
no
KGB
no
know
no
that?
no
No.
no, they didn't, and they didn't check on me because the moment they check on me, they would put me in danger. So I knew. See, when I knew for sure that they uh, wouldn't know that I got married, and they wouldn't know that I have a child, because when I uh, when I became the valedictorian in the U.S. college, they didn't know it. They would have read me the riot act. That was not a good thing to be a standout,
I see.
right? So I was almost 100% sure that they didn't know. My God, actually went back to Moscow after I got married. Every 2 years, I was back in Moscow for some debriefing and rest and relaxation and meet the German family. And if they had known that I was married, they would have kept me there and possibly put me in jail.
Wow.
So I knew they didn't know, and then I also knew that they didn't know about the child. So, but and I had in my mind I tried to figure out how I can take care of this girl, because I was a loving father, I was a doting father, and the girl's mother, her name is Chelsea. The girl's mother had 4 years of schooling. She was from South America. The both of them would have grown up in a slum, literally. And I couldn't have that. So now I didn't know. Now my hand was forced. I had no solution. I didn't want to tell the KGB that to help me, send money to this girl, because again they probably would have kept me in a very uncomfortable living conditions. so I stalled for a while because there was always a reason why I I didn't read the signal. Why I didn't respond? And actually, that was on a Monday. On a Thursday, I listened to the shortwave radio again, and in a few brief sentences, they explained you need to get out because we have reason to believe that the FBI is investigating you. Okay, so now there was always a possibility that the radio transmission failed or that the radio broke. Or one time I was sick for about a month and I couldn't do anything. But they eventually got really impatient and sent one of those diplomats to to talk to me. They knew, and I had to tell them that they knew the path I went to work every morning. So, and I'm waiting. I'm going upstairs, waiting for the A train, and there's this guy who's coming up to me in a black trench coat, and he whispers in my ear with a pretty heavy Russian accent, "You gotta come home, or else you're dead."
I would have been
No,
on
I
my
do not.
first flight back to Moscow.
Well, I hear you, but you have children.
No, I'm not a father. No,
Okay, so you don't
of
understand.
course, no,
You have not
no,
experienced the power of unconditional love,
no, not
particularly
yet.
towards. Now, really, I had to make a decision because now I knew that they knew that I knew that you know the emergency plan was
Relay to you.
support.
Yeah.
Yes, and I got one invitation for a dead drop to get a passport and some money. And I figured I go and pick up the money. At least I had not made a decision, still not made a decision. And when I get to that spot, which is a spot was really easy to find, was a tree in a park. This was in late December. There was nobody in the park, and the tree was hollowed at the bottom. Very, very easy to find. I found it. I described it. I knew exactly where that container was supposed to be, a crushed oil can, where that was going to be. And the protocol of a dead drop is that there are two signals. The first signal is put by the guy who deposits the container, and the second one is the one who takes it says, "Okay, I got it." So the first signal was there. So I say, "Okay, let me go pick up the money." And there was no oil can. And that was the first and only time that ever happened that we had a dead drop operation that failed. I just couldn't find it. I walked around for a while. It wasn't like accidentally placed a little close by. Nothing. So I walk out of the park and dejected. And at that point, my subconscious made a decision because the the analysis that I did as a scientist, like so, here's everything that can happen and will happen if I go home, and here's everything that might happen and might not happen if I stay. So everything that was good for me was over there back home. I got dollars saved on my behalf. They promised me a house. I had received that nice little medal,
Hmm.
right?
And at
I would
that
have lived a
time, the
good.
Soviet Union doesn't look like it's going to fall apart yet, or does it?
Nobody. The wall is still up, also,
Right, right.
and nobody had a clue. That was the surprise to
And
everybody.
how were you at that time ideologically after spending a decade in the U.S. already?
I had adopted the theory of the convergence theory. I don't know if you know what that is. What that meant really was cooked up by social democrats in Western Europe that decided that the best thing to do would be to take the good parts of communism and the good parts of capitalism and have it converge. So
So some
what
sort of like a
we want,
social democracy.
yes. And so what we have now, say in Scandinavian countries,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and I knew that capitalism was significantly more efficient in terms of wealth generation,
Hmm.
but also still knew that there was a lot of oppression of minorities.
Of course.
There was a lot of injustice, and there was a
Poverty.
lot of third
Yeah.
poverty, hungry, and all that. So let's just put it all together. That's where I was at the time. Uh, I also was still loyal to East
Yeah.
Germany, not the communist cause anymore. But I would not have betrayed East Germany for sure. But I walk out of that park and my subconscious says I'm staying. It was not a lot. It was not logically determined. There was the worst decision that I could have made in terms of self preservation.
Right.
So
You're
you
putting
tell me how
yourself
that
in
worked.
active danger with this decision because
Absolutely.
they laid it out that you're dead if you stay.
Well, chances were that if I tell them that I'm not following the orders, that they interpret this as a defection. So I I came up with this. That was another sudden inspiration. I don't know. I didn't research. I didn't analyze. Or I just came up with this like this out of thin air. All right, I'm going to tell him I have AIDS, HIV/AIDS. And I sent him to my last letter in secret writing. I told him that, yeah, I understand that I'm in danger, and I really want to come home, but I I have HIV/AIDS, and the only place where I could possibly get some treatment in those days, there was no treatment. It was a death sentence. So it's the United States, and they bought it. But now I didn't know that they bought it. I found out much later when I met my son as an adult, when he was an adult already. Yeah, they bought it, and I spent about 3 months taking uh, some measures of precaution, so that number one, just in case the KGB was about to come after me, I made sure that I was not findable in the same spot at the same time on any given day. So change my routes and I changed also the time when I went to work. I had flexible hours and stuff like that. And I also did surveillance detection to see if the FBI is after me. I don't know what I would have done if I found out that they were. And I did one other thing that made me pretty certain that the FBI is not coming after me. There's a way to find out whether your mail has been opened.
Hmm.
I wrote a letter to myself, and I closed the letter and left about 1 inch uh, that wasn't where I didn't moisten the gum. Typically, letters are opened mechanically and then they're reclosed completely. So, and I mailed this from some fictional address in New York City to me, and when I opened it, it was still dry, that spot. So nobody had opened the letter. So I was pretty sure. After 3 months, I was certain I was home free, and that's when I told my wife,
Yeah.
Chelsea's mother, uh, it's time to see if we can get a house in the suburbs.
So that
So I knew.
communication that you sent to the KGB telling them that you have HIV, that you have AIDS, that
Yeah,
was the last time you
yeah.
were in contact with them. Then everything just
Yeah, that
stopped.
was absolutely the last time. There was nothing left. Um, and I knew when they had received and read the letter is when the radio transmission stopped, because every Thursday, no, they actually were transmitting at one point every day. So listen every day, and I turn it on and it beep 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 beep. Oh, shit! And I certainly didn't write it down. But one day I turn it on, it was dead silent. So I knew they had gotten the letter. And
It's
this is
over.
when yes, but it wasn't over in terms of me like being cautious. This is when actually the period of caution started, because at that point I didn't know whether they believed the lie or not. Now, In hindsight, again, they had no reason, absolutely no reason to not believe it, because all they knew about me was what I told you, that all the good shit for me was back in, well, on the other side of the wall.
So the FBI eventually does get on your trail. How and why
Yeah,
does
nine
that
years
happen?
later.
Not at that time, but at a later time.
Yeah, it was 9 years later.
9 years later. So
And
you have 9 years of living as an ordinary American. You stop being an agent. Excuse me. And after 9 years, the FBI finally knocks, I believe, on the window of your car.
well, well, they didn't knock on the window. They rented a state trooper to wave me over at as a crossing over the Delaware River, where you have to actually put a couple of quarters in. There was a toll bridge, and I had to slow. Okay, I had to go
Okay,
really
but let's
slow. I was like,
excuse me. I have to interrupt you here. How did they catch your trail in the first place? I mean, especially
uh,
because you weren't active anymore.
yeah, it was a betrayal. There's a person who worked in the archives of the KGB. He had access to. He was the senior archivist, and he had access to all kinds of files.
In Moscow.
And in Moscow, and he had developed a deep-seated hatred for the system. And the only thing that he could come up with how to do damage is like copy secrets by hand, small pieces of paper that he smuggled out in his underwear and in his socks. And when he got home, he copied it over with typewriter and buried this all in his dacha. And when the Soviet Union had ceased to exist and the KGB was dissolved, he went and said hello to MI6 at a British embassy in Estonia, I believe, and they managed to get the stuff out of his dacha. It was the biggest intelligence related catch in the history of intelligence.
Wow.
He had, I mean, there were still a lot of active agents. I mean, the Russians, like me, if I'm a Russian and I'm an illegal, what do I do now? So there was a lot of KGB assets were
Still in the US or all over the world.
yes, and they were disabled. I mean, there's a couple of books that were published after a while based on the notes. It's amazing, and amongst those notes were there wasn't a whole lot, but there was Jack Barsky, illegal in the northeast of the United States. And since Barsky is not a very common name, the FBI very quickly found that I was the person they were looking for, because I was the one who got his Social Security card at the age of 34, and that was highly unusual,
Mm.
right? So, and then they spent literally 2 years watching me. They were concerned that I was still active. They wanted to make sure that they were extremely cautious. Watch me from a distance until the lead agent determined that I really wasn't spying anymore, and that's when they decided to say hello. That was a uncomfortable moment.
Okay, yes, please tell us about it. So you're at the toll booth, they let you through.
Yeah, and the state trooper waves me over, nothing special, and he said, "Routine traffic stop. Please step out of the car." I wasn't thinking as quickly anymore as I used to, because that was unusual. Routine traffic stop, you don't step out of the car. You're just going to ask, "Can I have your
Yeah.
license and insurance?" I stepped out, and at that point, again from my right, like the Russian who came from my right at the subway, came a person, and he stops next to me and he flips open uh, an ID, and I didn't have to look at it. I knew instinctively that was FBI. And he later told me that I lost all the blood from my face. I went white. because all of a sudden, the thing I had already forgotten that I once was an agent. I had a good job. I was in my second house, nice house in the country, another child, a good-looking wife. I lived life as an American. I knew I would never go back to Germany, and clearly, I had completely lost my faith in communism and even convergence theory. Once I bought a house, I had become a capitalist. So, and that all just like seemed to like fall apart at that very moment, or at least there was a danger of falling apart. So they asked me to uh, step into one of their. They had one car there, into the car in the back seat, and the person who was sitting there was a partner of the lead agent, and he had a little prop. The prop was a handgun that was attached to his ankle in such a way that I could see it.
On purpose.
Little trickery. That didn't bother me. I mean, I knew they wouldn't shoot me,
Right.
apparently they were still worried that I might.
Pull out your
Run.
jujitsu moves.
Oh yeah, or run.
Right, right.
Because they knew that I was a runner because I was always out running. Every other day I went for a run. So they took me to a motel where they had. It was an L-shaped motel with about uh, 15 rooms, and they had rented one wing. So they had, and at the entrance where I went in, they had a guard armed with a machine gun, and I saw another man standing at the end of the hallway. So I'm figuring there was another guard, and they put me right in the middle. So I think that to make sure that nobody could eavesdrop, somebody somehow found their way into the adjoining room. And there was another little prop that at that point, uh, I had my senses back. I was fully functional, and they had some poster where uh, they had some bits and pieces of information, such as my code name and an address that I used to send letters in secret writing to, and something else. And I immediately realized they don't know much of anything because it was all information from my early years.
They got nothing.
So what they wanted to indicate is like we know a lot of stuff about you. And that trick wasn't necessary, but because at that time already, I spoke before they actually could ask a question. I said to them, I know that this is not a comfortable situation here, and I know that the only way for me and my family to get out of this situation with the least amount of damage is if I cooperate completely, and I will absolutely do that. And so we started talking and a little bit of an interview. It wasn't really an interrogation, it was quite friendly. And after 2 hours, they let me go home.
Wow.
Not without a warning from one of the armed guards. He said, if you think of running, we got, we got all the intersection covered. So I'm thinking, where am I going to run? Not there was no place to run, and but they didn't know that 100%. It evolved as I started telling them, my story. And the one thing that I know that's part of me, uh, I'm a very credible person in terms of what I tell people. That makes me also a very dangerous liar. Okay, and in the 60 Minutes interview, the interviewer asked me, "Were you a good liar?" And I just like didn't have to think about it. I said, "The best, of course. I lived a lie."
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm uh, very glad that I don't have to lie anymore because I'm really wired to tell the truth. In your face, baby. As a German, as a German,
Yeah.
as an American, I'm wrapping it up in
In a nice package.
uh, Yes, it's very soft and gentle, and some velvet around it. Yes, not passive aggressive, but I learned how to communicate softly and still tell the truth in love. And so, and that was pretty much the end of the story because I became a citizen about like 5, 6 years later,
But
and
you
then I
have to
went back to.
probably you had to cooperate. You have to give some
Oh
information. You
yeah,
have to help
absolutely. No,
out. Did they consult you on some current events or the current state of the illegals program? Anything like that?
I had no knowledge, and I couldn't give away anybody because I literally had no knowledge. But what was very important for them was, the methods and operations, because even though there was no more Soviet Union, the intelligence services of Russia were trained by who?
Yeah.
And some of them were like just KGB agents that went over into the services. So they still operated in a similar way. It was apparently very valuable to them. The lead agent of the FBI who actually had to win an argument with his boss who wanted me in jail, and he said, he's more valuable if he cooperates with us. He got a commendation from the FBI director for the job that he did. So it must have been quite a bit of value. I had a couple of instances where I was able to consult, at least give my opinion as to how to handle a matter. And there was one time there was significant thought spent as to whether they would send me to Australia, where the Australian counterintelligence suspected a sleeper, a Soviet sleeper who was still there, and they thought I could wake him up. Somehow they dropped it. So, but I think I provided value, and going forward, I provided even more value by doing a outstanding job in corporate management.
Mm.
So I don't I whatever damage I might have done, which I don't know. Hopefully, I provided counter value on the other side.
Do you think? Of course, we know of the illegals program carried on with the Russian Federation, the famous Anna Chapman story. A lot of also very clumsy work, clumsy agents. The Novichok
Yeah.
poisoning in the UK.
Oh
The
yeah.
famous funny video of two agents saying they were in Salisbury because they wanted to see some sort of cathedral that nobody knows about. I don't know if you've seen that. But do you think this kind of program or programs are still running?
Yeah, they are. Well, you know that recently there were like three of them were caught in, I think two of them in Brazil and one in Spain, and then the 10 that were caught in 2000, I think it was 2010,
Yeah.
were arrested, and they were like rank amateurs. They were like very poorly trained. There's an FBI surveillance video that you can watch on YouTube, and they make every damn mistake in the book that I was told not to make. And I believe that has a whole lot to do with the fact that the KGB was much better staffed and had more financial resources. They had they had the ability to comb through hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates like me and pick the right ones, and then train them for 4 to 5 years, and then support them. That's a lot of money, and you have to use the very best that you have to find them and train them and run them. And Vladimir Putin doesn't care as much. He doesn't. He just can't. He doesn't have the kind of resources,
That the Soviet Union
and
had.
he doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he doesn't mind if illegals get caught because it scares the heck out of people. Because when I started doing public appearances, and I always get the questions, "How many illegals do you think are still here?" And I said, "I don't know. There could be a lot, but you got to be more worried about the the Knox. The Knox is short for not official cover. The exchange students and the business people and and musicians. artists. There's so much more movement across borders these days, and the was it Maria Butina?
That sounds familiar,
She
but I'm not sure.
Butina is a famous redhead who made contact amongst the National Rifle Association, and so she was pretty successful making contact. But I know she was not a trained agent. She communicated via social media. This Putin, he obviously he tries to do some more complex operations if and when he can, but he likes to throw volume at the problem and he hopes that some of that sticks, and you don't know because if somebody is successful, we don't know about them.
Right, and
We
if
only
they're
know about
and like you said, if they're not successful, then at least they can scare the shit out of people, which is also something. At
that's
least
right.
better than nothing.
That's right. And one more thing with regard to the quality of their people, the GRU is the by anybody who knows something about Russian intelligence, the best intelligence service of the three.
Yeah,
And even the GRU couldn't get it right. The poisoning effort that with the Novichok and
in the
what's
UK.
his name,
Yeah.
yeah, in the UK, they could not get out of the country undetected, and that's the best team that they have,
Yeah,
right?
those are the two guys that are talking about the cathedral. I think they were GRU, right? By the way,
Yeah,
do you think the
go ahead.
CIA has something similar as well? Some sort of illegals program?
I don't know, and I sh- and I don't. I have a friend who was a station chief for the CIA in Moscow, a really good friend. I guarantee you, if I ask him, he will not tell me.
Of course, of course.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. But I tell you what, in my days, it was so much easier to recruit somebody to go from the east to the west than the other way around.
How
I
come?
mean, the other way around would have to be an individual born to Russian immigrants who decided, and it's a case like that, who decided actually to move back. And in that case, you could possibly introduce an illegal who speaks the language fluently. But this is like not, that's a
Extremely
lucky.
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It would have to be a very lucky stroke. So, uh, and so, in the days of the Cold War, I guarantee you there were no American illegals in the Soviet Union.
We have to wrap up soon. I've eaten a lot of your time. Too much.
I told you you will go
You
over.
did tell me.
We
You
should
did
have
tell me. And to
we
be.
should have made a bet. I'm not going to die, okay? So I'm not a prima donna. I'm
I
not going to hold you
appreciate
to
that a
chin
lot. I really appreciate that. I wanted to ask, how has the spy game changed since the days you were active? Now we have everybody has a smartphone, everybody has a camera, social
Yeah,
media,
yeah,
cameras everywhere, surveillance, satellites. I don't know what
yeah.
else. How can you even
Right.
be a spy in this age?
You still can, but there's a lot of technology-based spying and technology-based communication
So more
for
like
sure.
hackers instead of like actual spies that we're used to, like you were.
Hackers, also deep fakes,
Oh,
right?
that's so boring. It's becoming
Uh,
boring. It's not that sexy anymore.
but if the deep fakes are really, really good, they can do some significant damage.
Of course, but it's
But
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go
they're
ahead.
most they're mostly meant to stir up trouble, and even some Russian deepfakes were successful enough to penetrate certain radical organizations in the United States, and actually uh, initiate demonstrations.
Hmm.
Like there's the lady, who, for instance, that joins, let's say, a group that is against global warming,
Yeah.
and she becomes a leader. because she's so good. The fake is so good, it's credible. And then one day she says, we need to we need to demonstrate, mobilize everybody. And then she told everybody who's doing what. And I can't come because I broke a leg. There's a documented case in a book called Russians Among Us. I forgot the author.
Right.
I
And
don't
that's
have it.
all done online with deepfakes.
Yeah, yeah, deep fake. And then believe it or not, open source intelligence is incredibly powerful. There's so much information lying around just for the looking. I once took a course in the short the abbreviation is OSINT, open source intelligence, and I was just it was
But what does
blown
that mean,
away.
open source intelligence?
Well, you can find tons of information about me because I've been on the internet for forever and I
Right.
leave a trace.
Yeah.
Uh, and you can just oh here's one example. A friend of mine who is an expert. He knows how to create deep fakes, and he also is very very familiar with OSINT techniques. I call him up, and he said, "Did you have a good run? Oh, you're running around this lake." I said, "How did you know that?" And then he told me he didn't hack. He accessed one of those cameras that's just out there. He found it, and he just said hello, and he could see me.
Creepy.
That it's you fundamentally is impossible to protect yourself from being discovered in some way. It's astounding. And now, with all that said, what the king of intelligence, the one with a crown on his or her head, is human intelligence. Until and unless we can hack into a human brain, humans still are making decisions.
Hmm.
And wouldn't it be nice if we knew what Putin is thinking right now? And wouldn't they want to know what our decision makers are thinking? So that part of intelligence is not likely to go away anytime soon. I don't know what AI is going to do to intelligence when once we have real thinking machines. Who knows?
Hmm. That made me think of that movie. I don't know if you saw it. It's more of a comedy, Burn After Reading by the Coen brothers. It's their espionage movie.
No,
Oh, okay. Okay, it's really funny.
I need to write it. No, listen, I need to write it down because
Please watch
I'm
it.
developing.
I think you might enjoy it. It's just a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
know that I know the names. They're funny.
yeah, Burn
The
After
Coen
Reading.
brothers.
Right, right. Uh, and there's a phenomenal scene. I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil it for you. At the end, when the CIA chief is provided with all the information that his agents could gather about this conundrum of various people just doing random things, and he just says, "I have no idea what just happened. What did we learn from this?" I think he says, "We learned never to do it again, but I don't know what we actually did." And then he just closes the file, and that's the end of the movie. And that made me wonder, since you said that, after all, we still need a human brain to interpret all the
Yeah.
information. That means that the human brain is still faulty, and that means that sometimes, even with a lot of data, we can't know or don't know what's going on. That must happen in the
Oh
spy
yeah.
world as
So
well.
for instance, if I know if I let's say I become a close friend with Vladimir Putin, right? And we talk about something, and I say, "Whoa, this is interesting. I'm going to send this to my handlers," and he changes his mind tomorrow. All
Right.
right. So yeah, ultimately, in the history of intelligence, I believe there weren't too many really grandiose successes because the world is not a better place today. It's a more dangerous place than it was uh, several decades ago with what's going on with the threat of a nuclear war.
All right. On that sobering note, we're going to conclude this
Yep.
conversation. But not before I ask you, what's your favorite spy film of all time?
Spies Like Us.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. Interesting. I'll make a note.
That's a comedy.
Oh, it's a comedy as well.
It's a comedy, and the other one is a German one. It's called Kundschafter des Friedens. That means Scouts for Peace.
Hmm.
East German agents were actually called that Kundschafter des Friedens. It's also a comedy.
So you're definitely gonna like Burn after reading. What did you think about Das Leben des anderen, the lives of others?
That was eye opening, actually.
Okay,
It was totally eye opening because I now have talked to enough people who know that this wasn't fiction. This was reality, and I had no clue that this was going on while growing up in East Germany because I lived in a bubble. I knew we didn't have any relatives that were in the West. My father was in the party. We were never investigated, and I didn't have a friend uh, who had somebody in the family who was victimized by the Stasi, or who knew somebody who knew somebody. Now, it may well be that they had knowledge and didn't share it, but I had not. Honestly, I had no idea.
of course. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Jack Barsky, thank you so much for this eye-opening, fascinating conversation. You have a book out. It's called Deep Undercover: My Secret Life
Yeah.
and Tangled Allegiances as a KGB Spy in America. I believe it's available everywhere, all fine bookstores everywhere. Do you have any
Well, not
No?
about everywhere, but on Amazon for sure,
Yes.
and it's also available in translation in Swedish, German, and Polish.
Perfect. Do you have any social
Uh,
media accounts, or where can people see what you're up to
yeah,
these days?
it's jackbarsky.com is my website. I'm also on LinkedIn, but one thing I want to mention for people who don't like to read, there's a really well made production. People call it a podcast, but it's not like the typical podcast where somebody just like talks to another person. It's an audio drama. It's an audio documentary. It's like a documentary with audio only, which is a bunch of interviews. Um, but it's not just with me. It's interviews with the FBI lead agents. Interview with my daughter, who found out that I once was a spy when she turned like 18, and a few other people that were important in my life. And what makes it really good is it's narrated by an A-list actor,
Hmm.
so the episodes are connected. There's historic background. They talk about when the wall came down and the kind of stuff. And there's music in there as well. So it got an award. It's called a Webby, which is the best of its type, of its class on the internet
Nice.
production. And this is called The Agent. And if somebody is looking for it, they should always look for the agent and then add the word of the production company. Otherwise, you get too many responses. Will you write the agent and and uh, and a space imperative? That's the production company. You'll get to it, and it's free of charge. It's available free of charge on all major streaming platforms like Apple Music and Spotify and whatever else is out there.
Fantastic. We'll definitely give it a listen.
Yes, I like it a lot. The producer did an outstanding job.
Great. Um,
Hmm?
Thanks again, Mr. Barsky. This was great. Oi! Thank you for listening to the episode. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe and follow on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. As always, eternal glory and gratitude to my producers who are supporting this show on Patreon: the kings and queens, Gordan, Jurechuk, Lorenzo, Veronica, Mila, Carmen, and Taichi. Without you, this pod would not have been possible at all. If you'd like to become a certified Tovarish or Tovarishica of the show too, head to Patreon, find Smart Cookies podcast on there, and become one. It's as simple as that. Thank you.